welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff people do in marketing and how to not do that by using solid marketing foundational principles. Because in marketing, there's a lot of things. It's a lot of noise. There's a lot of tactics. There's a lot of platforms. There's a lot of do this that you can hear. And that's not overly helpful in terms of helping you figure out what you might do. And so today we're going to explore around that. What might you do from our topic of today, which is not just related to marketing? Because guess what, folks? Marketing is just one department of an overarching business strategy. It is not the end all be all. Sorry, marketers. We are not all that it's about. Today, we're going to be looking at how marketing participates in the business from a holistic perspective and what type of things might come up operationally within a marketing department, or as a marketing department is connecting to other departments that can be crazy and stupid as well. Crazy and stupid, not helping you in the long run. Also, let's do a quick refresher, because we haven't for a while, on what it means to be crazy and or stupid when it comes to crazy, stupid marketing. Crazy, based on the classic definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Yeah, we do that a lot in marketing, folks. So, but not on this show. We don't. And stupid being that the only reason you're doing it is because someone else told you that you should. This based on the classic, I think everybody's dad said it growing up, where if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? And everyone's like, no, Dad. Yeah, the jumping off the bridge, except we do a lot of that in marketing as well, but not on this show. So quick refresh for everyone about what it looks like to do crazy stupid marketing, because what we're going to talk about next is not that, the opposite of that, how to not do that. And as always, I have a lovely guest joining me in the conversation, because while I could talk for an hour just myself, it's not nearly as interesting than if we have a conversation between people who have multiple perspectives. So today, to talk about holistic marketing operations, we have Paries, who is joining us, who knows lots of deep down the gritty of making operations work in an organization. So not just from a marketing perspective, but from an organizational perspective. So if you are joining us live in the conversation, welcome. And please let us know that you're here. There's this fancy little comments section. We would love to see who is joining us live. And if you have any specific questions, insights, perspectives, ideas that you want to share as part of the show, please feel free to pop it in the comments, and we would love to bring that over into the conversation. That's the intro. Paries, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your expertise, and why you care about operations being holistic?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everybody. I'm Paries. Ran a company for over 10 years here in Calgary. It was a construction company, JPF Group. And I've actually worked for more than 30 companies in the city since I was 13. So it's really interesting to see how the operations of an excavation company, an airline, even an oil and gas company. So it was very interesting to see from small to big, there'd be thousands of people working, maybe just even a handful of people. And the operations side of things, of course, when it came to marketing was always the top dog of a conversation. So the holistic of it, as when it came to the financial piece of accounting, the marketing, the operations, sales, I totally saw that it was very important that they all played together as a whole. And the success of having the marketing piece, sometimes it's really about cash flow, sometimes it's really about awareness and really understanding what marketing is. I think we've evolved for sure. Everybody thinks of the advertising Mad Men kind of style for marketing.
But they just took that and put it on digital ads.
Yeah. So now, of course, the internet has evolved and revolutionized what that whole definition of marketing is. People try to bulk it with branding and social media and every word that you could possibly think of. So I think as a whole, we should definitely define it, but also see how everybody can play together, because we spoke about this before. Marketing has a great just start to end. May that be the experience of not only the customer, but the experience of the internal staff and the company's culture. So to have it kind of seamlessly walk through, then we're not promising one thing internally and giving someone else outside of the company as stakeholders something else, right? So I love it. I kind of think of a business as, or even corporations as a human. They are birthed, they die, they live forever, or they live very short, which is a very sad situation, I'm sure. But it needs to be fed, it needs to be grown, it needs to have a family and an interior culture of whatever that looks like. So look at it holistically.
Well, when we're talking about holistic things, there's obviously a lot of different directions we can go in the conversation. And first of all, let's all say hello to, I'm pretty sure this is Catherine, live from the local laundry warehouse. Although it's coming up as LinkedIn user. I'm pretty sure it's Catherine. I mean, okay, let's ask you this, Paries, because like when we think about a holistic strategy, that feels really big, right? And maybe a little overwhelming for people. So if we have a desire to look at something holistically, how do we break that down into some of the things that we can actually do today, that we can actually action?
Doing it today would be just having a conversation or even taking a pulse within your company for each division of what that looks like. But always having that thread of how are we acting and behaving out in the world, I think. So it would always be interesting when our sales team had to talk to our accounting team, and it's just like there is still that underlining piece of how are we communicating is really what it was, or even a little bit of research and development of what's the best way to do XYZ with customers or internally. So when they were having that communication, I always found it great to have the marketing team just being aware. There's like this underlying awareness of, are we having the same thread of communication or conversations as a whole? Obviously, we're not going to bring a marketing team into a mass like annual review of all the finances or something like that. That's not necessarily what it is, but it's always knowing the layer of an onion, right? Are we going to have like a quarterly conversation where it's all the C-suite team or all management of just making sure we're all on board, and then trickling the effect down below if that is for trades or for subcontractors, or if you're in a warehouse, like your warehouse staff and stuff like that, just so we can have what it looks like as the visionary for the leader or the founder or the CEO. Is it coming down to everybody that is in the vision of the company? So yeah.
Well, and I think so. One of the things you said was, how are we acting and behaving out in the world? And I think this is a key component, this we, because different departments show up in the world in different capacities. So we got we've got customer service, we've got marketing, we've got sales, maybe you have delivery, maybe you have a like operations or development type of department. And there's different ways and naturally different ways that each of those people show up in the world. And so, I mean, last week we talked about values in marketing, and we ended up like really playing around this idea of culture, right? And so is this a culture component? And then I feel like right now we're into this stage where like culture is kind of being owned by HR, but is this a big, does that solo ownership add value?
Well, I like to throw the SOPs in, or the standard operation processes. It's actually really, if you're wanting to lay the foundation, and it is cultural, it's a documentation of what we do is how we do things, and it's kind of clear. Without clarity, it's confusing. Without having that piece of knowing how to not behave, like obviously we don't have robots walking around in our company. Like we want you to be you and empowered and feel like you know what you're doing. But there's that underlying piece of documenting it, so everybody feels like I hear you, you hear me. Like, are we going on the same path of what that looks like? And even with obviously technology, we can't hide from that. The digital aspect of being able to capture people's opinions of working on their teams and the stakeholders, and being able to have that review of each other and that camaraderie. Or sometimes there is issues in being able to communicate that across the board. We could look at the marketing team and be like, how are we communicating when there's a conflict with clients? Can we transfer that back internally in the standard operation processes of the team? Especially if it's teams that don't necessarily play together. Like, you could be working in a situation where, again, there's someone out in the field, but there's an engineer that's working on tech or dev inside of the office on IT. They don't really communicate or see each other. But what if there is a company retreat or something? How are we going to relay that? Or how is that person maybe affecting the company in IT versus on the field, and they can collaborate with ideas and thoughts and really have that pulled in? So it's just really, it is culture, yes, but it is a bit of standard operation processes of like what the nitty gritty of that company is being translated to, if it affects the day-to-day activity, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it like totally makes sense. And the word that popped out for me that you used was collaboration, right? Like, how do we collaborate? And I think maybe our brains think that like every group of humans collaborate together the same, but this is not at all the case, right? So the way that you and I collaborate together isn't the way that I collaborate with my husband, right? That's not the same. And so being able to create those like collaboration SOPs, like, this is how we work as a team to create collaboration. It allows people to, I have a great friend who always says there's freedom in boundaries, right? It allows you to say, like, how can I optimize my participation within this framework in order to optimize my contribution to the collaboration? And then to some degree, I do think that's a culture component. Like, are there people in this organization who want to contribute as much as they can? Do we have people who are just kind of skating by? And once you get to an organization of a specific size, you're going to have both of those people. So it's, now I feel like I'm making it into a big thing again, right? And even Lisa in the comments here is saying, so many pieces make up the whole. What's your recommendation on prioritizing to have the best impact on developing a stronger holistic approach? I mean, like, something that comes up for me is that communication, right? If we don't have communication from a holistic perspective, then we're probably not going to have collaboration from a holistic perspective. And we're probably not going to have a brand experience that goes to market that's holistic either. But maybe there's more to it.
I think you said something good earlier about boundaries too. So if you're going to establish boundaries, which is a part of documenting standard operation processes, there's that layer of an onion again, right? If we have the founder and we have the management or the C-suite below, or maybe it's just the management if you're small, but being able to maybe have once a month that you're having that conversation as a holistic. Now we're going to scale that down into, well, what are the tasks or the conversations to be had weekly and daily with management, with the people below? So it's really just kind of scaled and structured is probably the best way to say that, the framework. I think a lot of leaders may or may not know what's the framework to make this system and processes work, right? Like, think of a machine. The machine has its parts. We're going to break down those parts. So if it breaks, we can take it apart and put it back together, right? So if you're going to have your team and you're going to document things, now you're going to have an implementation or an execution conversation that is always at this time. May that be quarterly, yearly, monthly, weekly, and then with whom and why, and how are they going to be able to communicate back? How is each team member going to be able to now say, okay, well, here's where my strengths are. I'm going to go hard because that's what you expect of me, and that we can watch that and see that person grow. And here's where there's a little bit of challenges for me. Where can I get that support? And then the leadership can now support in. So that is now a whole team is looking from a bird's eye view and then being able to kind of shoot down there and be in the day-to-day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Mike, here's my next question, follow-up question. Because I have participated in teams that had the structure, a very solid structure for that, but there was like something else that was missing that didn't allow the structure to hold. So like we had quarterly meetings, and like so the management team would go offsite for a quarterly meeting once a month, and then like 5 days later or whatever, we would have a team meeting, giving the management team time to structure how we were going to present things and things like that. And we had a very good framework even during the management meeting of, we're going to walk through this, and we're going to start high level, and then we're going to walk down into KPIs and all these things. But there was something that felt really disconnected about it. And so like, while I'm responsible for marketing, and the ops director is there, and our sales VP is there, and like everyone is in the room together, and theoretically we are executing on like a holistic planning session, the like execution of that didn't create a holistic feeling. So can you talk a little bit about like how we shift from that procedure into making that the experience of the people?
Great. What I think, and I think it should be a movement, and I think maybe that's something that should be more of a conversation, is the relationship and mental support between members, and having it so less robotic, and remember that we're humans as well.
Yeah.
And it's always keeping that professionalism within the corporation, but still having that camaraderie as a culture. And then we go back to the word culture, because that comes from the leadership. If the leadership is like, stay far away, arm's length, you're going to have that all the way down. If you're going to have that come close, my door is not only open, it's here for us to have a conversation. And I'm actually going to ask you to have that conversation, just saying, oh, my door's open. I always found it so cold. It's like, it sounds like
my door is always open.
My door is always open. And it's like, no, I need you to tell me to come in, because that's maybe not my personality.
Right.
Or I don't know if your time is available. We always think that the founders and the leaders and the managers are too busy. And that's a big conversation we had. And that's back to boundaries. Are we too busy? That's not good. That made me, as an operations manager, I'd be like, okay, hey, boss man, can we scale back? Because the revenue that's getting pushed so hard and bringing in the door might make the legs fall off, right? Because it's not always about making more revenue each year. It might be about, this revenue is consistent every year, and we are doing a better job internally and for our clients or customers. Mm-hmm. So there is something to say that there is an emotional piece and a relationship piece that I think nobody was ready to talk about in the last several years. So I think that there should be more of an investment on the relationship piece, not just going out and doing a team event that's golfing or whatever that looks like, even though that is fun.
I did an archery tag once. Yeah, but shot in the ribs.
Doesn't give the opportunity to have an actual conversation of, hey, Tracy, how you doing? I know you work in the office. I work out in the field. How's life? Like, is it easy? Is it hard? Are you spending a lot of hours? Oh, let's have an actual human-to-human conversation. So, yeah. Operations is a little bit more of management care too, and people care.
Well, and I think this is, I mean, it's interesting even when I'm creating a comparison in my brain between like what I think operations is and what I think marketing is, because in marketing, we get into doing very easily, right? Like we do stuff, and I'm like, usually it's because we have a protocol, right? Or we have a defined target metric or KPI that is driving that. But if we don't like step back from the doing and get into those like relationship conversations, which I put more into the being category, then we are just behaving like robots. So then it's not very surprising that your employees don't interact with each other, because they're just being robots. We haven't created the space for that.
Or it's forced relationships. It's like, I may not have anything in common with the other person at all.
Yeah.
And so we obviously don't want to force that either, but it could open a door that you don't know of, where there is that relationship or camaraderie or things that you like that are the same. What if you both paint and you don't know? Maybe that's something that you've found a new friend. So it's one of those things where I think everybody dances, especially in corporate, like you don't want to go too unprofessional and too personal. But that might be a model that needs to be changed, especially if you want retention and resistance against a world that's a little bit tougher now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, there's some good questions coming in the audience, and I am going to go to them, but I have to ask this first because we're talking about the human relationship stuff. What happens when we have remote employees now? And we're talking about it. Actually, this kind of goes into Catherine's question as well about tips on having those human-to-human conversations to not break boundaries from the employee or for the manager. And then later on, now we got to have these in person, and we might have to have them remotely as well.
Well, that's when you start pulling in HR as well. I think I always found like Zoom was kind of the wild, wild west post our big 2020 fun. But it's interesting to know, like, is that one of the standard operation processes or boundaries that as a whole, how are we communicating and how are we behaving in our business? How are we overseeing each other? It was funny. I think I saw something they're like, they measured how much someone's mouse on their computer moved to see if they were actually working. And it's like, well, things like that is like, does that sound like a positive relationship with those that are working remotely? But yeah, remote situations, I've heard of companies being able to have remote time. So they actually have meetings that aren't only business based with leaders or other coworkers, and it's actually a social time to keep that kind of connection. And they also have a situation where they can not report on each other, but honestly be like, this is how my week was and my interaction with the staff and my colleagues, and especially the work that they were doing. So there's that opportunity to, again, it comes from the leadership to make the decision of what that looks like in this world of remote, and maybe not let it be a fleeting thought like, oh, I just have remote workers, whatever. I once worked for a company, we will not name the airline, but they're not in a very good position right now. And when they sent people home to work, it was just, again, a free fall, and the emotional effects was just not rectified. And it's like, wow, you really should have thought of that as the front leads of connecting with your clients and consumers and being there. So again, it's putting the process and procedure in place, and then also having a coaching or I would say coaching for the employees on how to do this. Sometimes we forget how to hang out with each other, which is so sad but true. But it's really, again, back to this mental health situation. If you're sitting at home remotely working for a company and you're plunking away and doing your thing, circle back and be like, hey, let's have some social skills, fun, and conversation, and not be awkward about it, saying like you are an introvert, let's help you. No, it's more of, hey, our company policy is to check like, how you doing? Can we let you interact with so-and-so? We think it's going to be a great fit for the company. Get to know one another and let us know how it went. So really having that social piece and community.
And I think this is interesting too, because I think people are talking about this more and more now, like what it looks like to have a community within your business. Like a lot of times before, it was just like, you have your department and I have my department, and this is a business, and it's not about being a community. And it's interesting. I'm going to go to some more of the comments in the chat here, because Lisa is sharing, due to personality types, it's important that communication takes place in multiple ways. Not everyone likes to talk. Not sure why. Clearly, I don't fit into that category of not liking to talk. But I won't also pretend that I haven't been in work scenarios where I was intimidated, or I had seen enough to know that if I share in this arena, then it's probably not going to have a very positive response. So maybe I will not do that. And I really like what Shireen is saying here about the climate. It's of the organization when you're in process mode and gathered, creating a team climate. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it, because it's almost like, one, you expect the climate to change, right? Like, I mean, I'm in Calgary. We expect the climate to change pretty constantly. And we joke about it, right? Like it's just become part of our expectation. And I think that's an interesting, kind of like what you were saying, Paris, about like, are we building this into how we do things, right? Are we treating it like a community? If this was your community, what would that look like? When we talk about things like climate and community, like, are we even using that language as part of our business interactions? Because if we're not using the language, it's probably not just going to magically manifest for us.
No, and again, you have to create the language as a little Bible to be able to be utilized. Even the question before, I was just kind of thinking, like, if they make people do personality tests to be a part of these bigger corporates, or I kind of did it with my small company of even us 10, but you have to now trickle that into the company. If I know my architectural technologist was the most non-social person, likes to stick behind that computer and dive in and do their work to the best of their abilities, and the social pieces and there, I'm not going to force you to come hang out with me. But it's also, hey, here's a way of you to document back to the team what you think. That's harder to be like anonymous because obviously it's small, but the relationship between the founder and that person, that's why I hired you. We should be able to have these conversations there. So I think kind of like 5 languages of love, like you're like, what is your best way of shouting from the rooftop? I'd be like, Tracy is going to talk to the world. So let her have her stage. Or it's
give me a microphone.
Yeah, give her the mic and she'll do it. Or it's not. And then where marketing plays in that is a similar thing. There's some psychology behind that. I would ask my marketing team, like, hey, do we have the software to, like, are we implementing this? Because my marketing team was a part of the dev team, like it was a part of our communication system as a whole for our software. And then it was just kind of the same thing. Like, how do we cascade that? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you just touch on an important part there, right? When you're saying, like, my marketing team is part of my operations or part of my dev team, right? This is not necessary. I mean, like, I've been in a marketing team for a software company that was not part of the dev team. Right? To try and get information out of the dev team about what product was doing, which is what we were supposed to be marketing, was not one. We had no SOPs for that. So that might have made a difference. But 2, like, it was just like, it was very separate. And I'm talking about, like, even back when we were in an office and all these people are in an office together, right? And yet it wasn't part of the conversation for the departments to interact with each other. So unless, like, I had a really good relationship with the VP of sales, so he and I would talk a lot about things, but that was not like an SOP thing for the business, right? That was just me and him having a good relationship. So we would chat and we would brainstorm, which was lucky for the organization, but by no means designed. So let's talk a little bit about that concept of designing a holistic organization, because we start, almost everybody starts off as one person, right? We have an idea, we're gonna try this thing, right? Maybe you have a family member or you have a friend who can code and whatever, and you start to build something, but you start as a, like, very connected small team. And then we start to build this up, and we build up to the point where now we have departments. And so by definition, we've created division, right? We've created a division of responsibility. They're saying, you guys are responsible for this, you guys are responsible for this, you got your own departments. But I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen, and that maybe there's different documentation that supports this, but, like, you'll see those org charts, right? These are these people, they work in this department and they connect this way and blah, blah. But, like, there's actually no information about the line, right? Like, how do these people, or if these are a dotted line, what does that look like? Is it that they're informed sometimes? Are they informed by email? Are they consulted? Like, what is the relationship that is demonstrated by that org chart line? So I just love to hear your thoughts on that, or if there's, like, a different level of documentation, or if it's dependent on the individual people, or all of those things.
It'd be all of those things.
Yeah.
You have to have an open door between divisions to be like, we expect you guys to talk to each other, not to be separated. I've seen it separated and you see the wheels fall off, or wondering why things are delayed. Well, the communication barrier is so broken, and until you guys have a unification between the person picking up the product versus the warehouse person versus the project manager, it's like, well, that's kind of ridiculous. Like, why would you guys like stop sticking to the org chart? Like, let's cross communicate, but only the management team can permit that or educate on it. It's like an education fault, really. It's like, did we create a community of being able to have that conversation, community, organization, or a community? From a really small perspective, from my experience, it was like, yeah, you go back to the founder and the CEO being like, can we have us whole? But it wasn't hard, because when you have to look each other in the face when the office is so small, there's really not that division in the org chart anymore. It starts to kind of mush or play along with each other. When it starts to get bigger as a company, and when I've been in that bigger, like thousands of people, you see that it's division of floors. The third floor doesn't want to talk to the 10th floor because the 10th floor is just too cool for school. And it's just like, well, yes, but the 10th floor is complaining about the third floor employees and what they're doing. And it's just like, okay, now it's a town hall of a communication of, okay, not a fight, hopefully, but things like town halls were where we had that opportunity to be like, hey, well, we're having this issue here for the last 2 months, and you over here aren't realizing it. What can we do? So that it's opening that door as a group conversation. And if you're not an organization that's okay with that, that shows what kind of organization you're going to
be. Yeah. Well, and this is, I keep hearing the word we. And maybe this is like my filter that I run everything through, because I think this solution to most things is a we. What are we going to do about it? Not like, hey, we have a funnel problem, so marketing, get on that, right? Like, okay, but can we like talk about this? Like, how does this flow through? Is marketing? I mean, I've seen a lot of people do a lot of marketing that then goes to die in sales, yes. Right? Yes. And not because of a problem with salespeople in general, but because of the process and the operations of getting someone from marketing to sales in a meaningful way. And so now we're talking about like, this is an operations process that may or may not be working for your organization, and not specifically because the marketers are not working in terms of generating interest and awareness, and not that the sales are not working and the converting leads, but they're not connected to each other. There's no interoperability. And so if we're not trying to create that, again, it's not just going to manifest on its own. We have to have an intention of creating connection points between the different departments.
Well, operations should, in my opinion, know all the divisions. What I mean by know, be comfortable with. To expect someone in the marketing division to be like, yeah, I know accounting a little bit. It's we always say we hire you to stick in your lane, right? But kind of hub and spoke model, like there's the operations as a center circle, and then each spoking off, but we should still, with that circle, be able to run the information around to each division and make them feel that they're knowledgeable and knowing what that is. That is things like having AGMs and town halls and being like, okay, let's look at this as a whole. And being able, as the operations person, to be like, I see all areas, but I'm going to also pull them all in together in the best structure that's possible, so we're not causing a mush or confusion. It's kind of like this saying that's going around lately, that people are removing the VP and CEO and trying to take the title away, so people realize we are all still on a team, and we is actually what is going to make this happen. Because every time you divide, do you conquer? Probably not. And that is maybe where these companies that are long lasting are keeping the conversation whole. And when they're not, it's just a revolving door for employees. It doesn't mean the company will die. It doesn't mean that they won't be successful. there's companies out there that are negative millions of dollars and they're still operating because that's just how it works. So it doesn't always work the way we think it should, or a straight line. But the operations piece, again, I like to look at the chief of staff, like I've discussed in the past with you guys, not you guys, you.
I'm multiple people sometimes.
And multiple people, yeah. If the president or a military has a right-hand person, that person or that operations person is looking for the people as a whole and kind of protecting them. But the operations is still making the company function as a protection feature too. So it's a double shield. It's about the people and it's about the processes as well.
Okay, so this is an interesting, and maybe this is a business size thing, but I would also say that I've worked in big businesses, I've worked in medium-sized businesses, and I've worked in small businesses. And I wouldn't say that I've specifically seen it come to life in like any of those places. But my question based on that is, I mean, your answer, Paries, is kind of operations is the who's looking at the whole. But is this something that everyone needs to be looking at? Like, I know as a leader, right, like an executive leader, I have a proclivity to look at the whole, right? So if my department's really productive, but nobody else is doing anything and we're not closing any business, then it doesn't really matter what we're doing over here because it's not showing on the balance sheet. And so while I will try to avoid a financial conversation when and if at all possible, and I don't want to know all the details about like how the money flows and the cash flow and interest rates and all that stuff, I can see whether or not my part is impacting the other parts. It's pretty clear to see that. So would you say that there is a role for everyone, a role for executive leadership, a role for operations? Like, who is responsible for looking at the whole?
The chief executive officer, if that exists, or the owner. Like that's it. Because when they come to marketing and be like, our bottom line is blah, that's still them letting you know, even though you can see it. But now it's like, okay, well, now let's get to work.
Well, would you also say though, like, because again, and maybe this is my predestination is like the we as the solution. But as a CEO, especially a CEO of a large organization, right? Like the people who have like, I've worked in a retail with like 200 stores, 1,000 people in the like whole office, right? Like this is a lot of people who are involved here. The CEO of that organization got direct FaceTime with about 12 people with the organization, 12 of the other executives, right? And then stuff kind of just like, hopefully, fingers crossed, trickles down to the people who are doing stuff, which are probably at least 4 levels removed from the CEO. So yes, we had like our town hall. We had quarterly, we didn't call them town halls. I can't remember what they called them, but this is like a whole company. And I wouldn't even say that. It was a whole corporate office. But like there wasn't store reps there, like the store managers didn't come and things like that. It was a corporate office meeting. And honestly, I feel like they just like gave away prizes. I'm not really sure we weren't in those conversations, which goes back to you might have the structure, but you might not be using it properly.
That's what I feel like's about to happen.
Well, and so this is what I'm feeling, right? Like we do have the structure. We have the structure that could help. So the VP of marketing sits in the meeting with the CEO, and the CEO reams out the VP of marketing for whatever is happening. VP of marketing takes it back to our weekly advertising team meeting and reams the rest of the team equally to how he has been reamed by the CEO. And then we're supposed to just figure it out. We're just supposed to like fix stuff. But we also, because of the hierarchy, don't have any autonomy to make any kind of significant decision. And so now we're kind of whether it's the SOP or the hierarchy or however we want to label it, has kind of handcuffed us into a system where we by nature cannot do any, like we can't, because we're also not in conversation, right? Like this is just like someone shouting down at me that I'm supposed to do a thing. And so, I mean, quite honestly, I've never been good at that. There are people who are better at it than me. I'm really bad at that. I want to know why. I want to know why we're doing a thing, right? Like, why would we want to do this? Why would we want to tweak this?
Right.
Like, we can try this, but like, for what reason? And it's interesting because then I feel like, even as a very small cog in a very big wheel, I brought not that I actually get to see the company from a holistic point of view, but I bought a like commitment to the whole, to the job that I did. And so when I think about this concept of who is looking at the whole, well, it's not necessarily about who has eyeballs on everybody's salaries, right? But it's like, who cares about this? Who cares about the whole of this? Because I mean, even when I worked in a small company, right? If I only care about marketing and I only care about us hitting our KPIs, that doesn't hit our corporate KPIs, right? Like that, it's not good enough. And maybe this is me being too demanding, but like for me, it feels like not good enough for me to just want to, like, I'm just going to do the thing I'm told. But maybe that's because I have again, natural proclivity to look at the whole. And maybe I am like hurting the process in some places because I won't just sit and do my job.
Well, it's like I've had a conversation with someone recently and they wanted to increase sales, but they didn't have any technicians to do the work. And I'm like, okay, so that's going to hurt.
So how will it?
So I was like, you could bring in more sales, but now if we have nobody operating on those sales, that's not good neither. So if we look at it, if marketing is your arm and your arm's losing blood and the blood flows through your body, are we going to cut off your arm or we're going to fix the problem? And so it sounds like the boss that came in yelling at that VP is not holistic.
I would know.
In his values.
At least not in my experience of him. I had a very limited experience of him.
Therefore, the culture is now being put separate, and then we're now back to segregation. And so if my arm is doing fantastic and waving around and doing great, but the rest of my body is dying, right? It's like, oh, this is awesome. The business is a whole body.
Yeah. Well, and this is
not
yeah. Well, and this is the whole point of holistic, right? Is that like whole. And Catherine has a question here about how do you bring the holistic piece as you're designing? Is it only up to the executive team, especially when you have a mix of the above and beyond employees versus let me just do my job well and go home versus I'm half foot in, half foot out? Some people who have like a full foot out and are just like, I'm out of here as soon as possible. When we're
as an employee, you mean like half foot out, like I'm out of here?
Yeah, like there's people who work for you. I mean, again, as a large organization, because I'll use an example.
You want a paycheck?
Right? Yeah. Like I don't really have a desire to like drive a truck and deliver retail furniture for my entire life, but I need a paycheck, so I'm going to do it. But if I get a better offer, I'm going to go and do that because I don't really care about this job.
As a founder and have been an employee, I've seen both roles.
Right.
And basically I can sniff it out when it's happening. Obviously. And you have to be fine with it as an owner. As an owner, if I know someone's like, they came in all gung-ho and now they're all like, I don't know, this isn't working for me. I as the owner have to now go and be like, okay, where did we go wrong? Can we give it one more chance? Or do you feel like your foot is literally out the door? And then it's like, we cut that off. Sort of hire, quick to fire, but you're not firing. I'm like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, are we doing okay as a company for you? Like, where did we fail as well? Like, it's a two-way street. But I think, and we've said this numerous times, as a whole, the founder, the leader, the owner, the CEO, whoever that head figure is at the top, if whatever is mentally or psychologically transferring all the way down is just how it works. It doesn't matter if the company is 20,000 people, because it still has a leader, a hierarchy. And in the hierarchy, if that goes down to the management, whatever that looks like, if you're not going to have a collaboration between teams and keep it separate, you're not going to have a good public view, that's for sure, or an internal situation, but you could still function. Like, that's the funny part. The company can still look successful or operate, but be falling apart at the wheels. Personally wise, people wise, operations wise, organized, unorganized, right? So yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about design evolution, because I'm pretty sure what you might design as a holistic operational connection points for a small business with 10 people will look different than the business with 200 stores and 200,000 people. So what role does like evolution play in the design as you grow?
Design, like the structure?
Yeah.
I just noticed, like, as a small business, I had a business coach, and then we started having like an advisory team. They helped us design what it looked like, and kind of coached us when things looked a little off, or if the performance review came back and it's like, hey, this is what is looking like it's happening internally. What do we need to do? And then we'd have that discussion. It's always having that discussion. I notice with larger, like massive firms, that's when they actually bring in teams of advisors or
management consultants,
HR, mental health supports, whatever that looks like. And those are the companies that you're like, wow, okay, they get it. They get that the growth mindset in someone's mind, if it's not there, and we're keeping a fixed mindset and a fixed separation, it's going to stifle and suffocate that organization. So there's different levels of having that partnership, that collaboration, that support. Like, I had to have a coach. I had to have somebody to support. Then we had to have the advisors when you're going into the multi-million dollars, because you're like, well, I don't know what I'm doing all this money and these people. and so when you get into the bigger corporations, and I just noticed again when I was working for that big corp, we have people coming in and having that conversations with us because they have to help design. It's like, I come from construction, architectural design is what we had for when we have a client wanting to renovate a home. It's the same thing for business. How do we draft this out? Where's the foundation? Who's going to do the pouring? Who's going to do the design? But I can't just do the design by myself or the designer. We have to have all the trades and all the people put their input, including the clients, because it's one whole body. So when we have that design piece of no matter big or small, I'm sure like Elon Musk, like there's not just him like waving his hand and let's do it like so. If you don't like him, I'm sorry, but
he's a good example, though.
But I'm just going to the extreme of there's thousands of people, hundreds of people running that design of the framework of that company, and the people and the communication and the standard operations and the documenting and the softwares that talk to each other. And even if they're not talking to one another digitally, I'm sure they have some sort of Google looking scenario socializing as staff members. It's all politics sometimes, and I'm sure there's corruption or whatever internally, or just relationship issues, but it's like a family, right? Like we love our brother and sister, or sometimes we don't, or our parents are annoying and we have to go report to them. That's what his life is probably looking like. And I'm sorry, as a small business owner, it's kind of what it looked like for me. I had to deal with the personalities and so there's a part of the design. How do I deal with personalities that don't get along? Okay, well, we're going to design it to be work in this area. Or if you want to complain about somebody, how are we going to do that? Or not complain, but report. Yeah.
Well, and I think like, what role then does like knowing what you need come into play? Because there's a lot of management consultants who probably could come in and tell you how to structure a business, right? But there's always like every business is unique to some degree. And just like you said, like maybe you know that you have a larger concern with people needing to report each other. So I need to have a process for that. Whereas some organizations would like not even think about that because that's not how their employees participate with each other on a day-to-day basis. So how important is it to make that holistic structure not just a structure that's in place, but one that reflects you authentically?
Risk management. You perceive it in advance. I think that was a different thing about me as an operations manager or CEO. I wanted or appreciated. I'm not going to wait till crap hits the fan. Right? Like, and if it does, and it happened, okay, we put this in place for the next time when it happens, it's not going to happen that way. It sounds pretty and good, but obviously something new and different will happen again. But I think having like a COO or a chief of staff is where they're supposed to be the risk manager and like, let's preempt these situations and have a plan and a teaching to the people of what that scenario could or would look like and how we're going to move forward. Because I know it sounds pretty and it sounds great. Obviously, as a small company, I couldn't have that all the time, but you definitely start to see it, especially post-COVID. It was like, okay, let's look at risk management. Like, what does that look like? And try to find scenarios that work the best. If marketing's doing amazing and sales is falling apart, okay, what would we do? Do we allow them to talk or do we not allow them to talk? Why? What's the problem? What's the way that they should communicate with one another? And it was small. Like, it was like my husband is a sales rep and the marketing team of 2 people over here. And I'm like, okay, let's have this conversation.
Well, and sometimes it's equally as hard to prioritize when it's a small team than a large team. And I think it's actually interesting because I never thought about it this way, about how the relationship between authenticity and risk management, because like I have specific risks because of who I am, how I do business, my industry, blah, 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 that I need to take into consideration and or that I notice so that I can pre-plan for. Because one of the things that keeps coming up for me is there's no way to ever like fully pre-plan everything. And I was listening to a book the other day, Mastering Uncertainty, by Matt Watkinson. Anyone who hasn't read it, I highly recommend it. But he was talking about how it's what has value is the process of planning, not the plan. And so it was really interesting because it's really just it's like practicing the skill, right? That builds the skill for the plan, but the plan itself, once it's documented, a whole bunch of other things are probably going to change. But like now I have a skill of planning, so I can update it, I can evolve it, I can add it, I can notice the risks in my industry and I can take those into consideration. And if they're risks that are not in my industry, then that's fine. I deprioritize them and maybe I'm bored one day and I come up with an SOP for them. But the point is that when I'm really tapped into what I need from a business perspective, and I being the business, right? So whoever wants to be a representative of that can choose to own that. What do I know about this business that I can help prevent in terms of risk? It'd be cool. I mean, I always thought this would be cool, even for like if you have teams of delivery drivers who are coming to you with feedback on like, hey, I've noticed this risk in this part of the work that we do. Maybe we could do this and it would decrease or eliminate that risk. But then it kind of comes back to the SOPs and the culture of people being able to provide that feedback as they go.
I was listening to a podcast, Diary of a CEO, and they were talking about Procter & Gamble. So back in the day, I don't know how old you people are on this call, but we used to use powdered soap for laundry. So anyways, it was given an example of they used to have people come in and do their life of that product and just have people watch on a two-way glass. So people would put the soap into the the drum, because we didn't have front loaders back then either. And you would put your hand in, and I used to do this as a kid. I'd put my hand in to wish around the powder. So everybody's watching this happen, and they're watching, and the lady just stand there watching the water, and then they came out. They're like, "Why are you watching the water?" She goes, "Oh, to make sure that the soap dissolves." And this is how they figured out to have liquid detergent. And so the operations manager goes to the scientist team, "Hey, like, this isn't working, the soap isn't working." They're like, "It's fine, we've tested it 1,000 times. What do you mean?" And there's a psychological situation that needs to be rectified, not a behavioral situation that has to be rectified. And that's why I think marketing is beautiful, because it's actually research and development. That's a marketing thing. That was being aware of that person's mindset of how they're behaving with the product, but it's also having a holistic conversation between operations, the scientists, the marketing team, those who are clients coming in. Like, there's all the stakeholders and one product. And look, it's revolutionized. So there's that journey piece, right? So it's not just the risk management of a whole industry falling apart because the product wasn't working, or the product was working fine. It's just they needed a new way to execute it. But it's also enjoying the unknown. Like, you don't know what you don't know, and having that, I hate using the door open, but having that open for all divisions to have that conversation so you can get to the next level as a team. Or it doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense to marketing, you stay over here and just hang out in your little wheelhouse and do your numbers. And if the bridge is falling,
post your blog posts.
Yeah, post your posts and not listen to what you have to say when it comes to the end of it. Because maybe that changes the cash flow. Maybe that changes the accounting for profit and whatever. So, yeah. And that's just one of their products, for all we know, out of the millions that they have in the world.
Right. Well, and I think, I love that you said marketing is research and development, because I would really love for marketing to behave more like research and development, where we're actually like testing things that are more than subject lines on an email. And if you're interested in exploring that, come and talk to me. We can talk about it and brainstorm, because there's millions of different things that you can test than just a subject line. But the point is that, and I don't know in that scenario if it was like by design that the person who observed that from a user testing perspective, like, and again, like, this is one of the things where I love, if we, all of us, so if you're a marketer today, or you're an ops person today, or you're an accountant today, or you're like any of the things, I believe in the benefit of getting curious about, like, how does my work integrate with the rest of this? How do I make people's lives easier? How do I make my people's lives harder? Could I do something about that? Right? Like, one of the things that I used to do as a manager was this start, stop, keep activity, where it was like, what can I start doing that would help you more? What can I stop doing because it hinders you? And what should I know to keep doing because you depend on it in order to make your life easier? And it was like such a good exercise, because one, there was constantly people who were giving me feedback. So this isn't like a once a year activity. We did it once a week. And there was always something, because people were then looking for it, right? Well, what could make my job easier? What could make my job harder? This would be easier if I could talk directly to the accountant about my client invoices instead of having to go through you. Okay, well, we could do that, right? Like, that is available, and like, there needs to be communication, or it needs to be CC'd, or like something, but like, we can make this easier. When we're looking for holistic opportunities, we find holistic opportunities. If we're not looking for holistic opportunities, then the likelihood that we will find them is very remote.
Well, we go back to synergy, right? Energy. If you're not having that synergy, and you can't bring that one document to the accounting team that possibly could save them minutes, hours, and it was like a revelation, the curiosity being killed is the killing of that energy, that synergy, that possibility of saving the bottom line. And it's just like, well, duh, Like, it's kind of like, okay, Mr. CEO founder, you're so excited about, or maybe you're not excited or unaware that like that relationship, conversation, collaboration does affect lines and money. And so to let the door be open between them, but not wasted, obviously. Don't go hang out at the coffee and chit chat, but have the strategic conversations and have the relational conversations to be able to have that. And if you're not someone that's personality to have that conversation, give them a wheelhouse to be able to. Powerful.
Yeah. Oh, so good, my friend. And here we go again with our 45-minute show that's turned into an hour show. And I'm just going to start telling everybody it's an hour. Just plan for an hour, maybe longer. Paries, where can people find you if they are interested in learning more about what it might look like to create a holistic operation?
Yes, they can go to PariesJohnson.com. There's a discovery button sitting there for you just to have a chat. No charge, it's free. Have a convo. Find me on LinkedIn, definitely on Instagram, having a little bit of fun. And besides that, yeah, it's the place to be, and we can chat more.
Awesome. Paries is also tagged in this live, so you can just click on her name and it will take you to where you need to go to schedule a discovery call and find the website and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for everyone joining into the conversation today. We came here to talk about holistic things, right? And so we talked about a lot of things. We touched on a lot of pieces. And just like every version of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, this is not meant to answer all of your questions. It is meant to be a place where you can start asking your own. So coming out of this, write them down if you want. Share them with me or Paries if you want. But what are the questions? Yeah. What are the questions that you have? Ignite that curiosity. Allow yourself to be curious about the topic and explore. How is that relevant to you? How is it relevant to your business? How is it relevant to your career search? I don't know. All of these topics really end up being like human topics at the end of the day. So it's probably relevant in some way, shape, or form. So ask yourself your question. And then we dropped a lot of good tips here today. So try on some of the things that you heard. Does that sound like something that might work for you? Does it sound like something that might not? If you didn't hear something that feels good to you, that does not mean it's not available. We can only say so many words in 1 hour. So book a conversation with Paries, have a conversation with me. Let's explore. Let's talk about it. See where it goes. Because the conversation is where the answers live, not in consumption. So with that, Paries, thank you so much for joining us. I want to give a big shout out to Catherine and Lisa and Shireen who are in the comments with us today. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and your wonderful questions. Until next time, everybody, permission to do you. Bye, everyone.